I hate them so much. And I really think they deserve it. And it's not just that they lie about everything. It's like they lie about everything and then they have the nerve to morally judge us. Like if you just watch even just the last few weeks of the Trump election, they're not in the business of reporting the news. They're totally just in the business of making you feel like you're a bad person if you don't fall in line with the regime. America has this giant war machine, right? Like we're just always at war. We're the most war-hungry country in the world. Even if we're taking a little bit of a break from a war, we'll fight 2 more proxy wars while we do that. America looks back at the 90s, Bill Clinton, as the time of peace and prosperity. We call it peace because we only fought a war in like Serbia and had a blockade around Iraq and were like bombing the crap out of Iraq with a few other military interventions in there too. You know, the UN estimated that Bill Clinton's sanction and bombing regime of Iraq, okay, everyone just thinks of George H.W. Bush's war and W's war, but Bill Clinton was bombing Iraq his whole, and he had a full blockade around the country. The UN estimated that 500,000 children died of starvation or malnutrition due to the blockade. Now, I've heard people argue, by the way, that number is exaggerated. Maybe it wasn't 500,000. Maybe it was only 100,000. So that's the time that we consider peace, when we were just starving 100,000 children to death in Iraq. And you, everybody in the corporate media, are in the business. Every single one of those wars, you've sold them. Everyone, my entire life, the media has sold those wars. And you're going to morally look down on me? You're going to judge me? Motherfucker, you're in the business of baby murder. Get the fuck out of here. You're looking down, judging an American because maybe I'm going to vote for Donald Trump, or maybe I dare to question the results of the last election. Fuck you, dude.
Probably the most consequential election of our lifetime. And within 24 hours of that, the largest podcaster on earth, really the largest platform on earth, the Joe Rogan Experience. Joe Rogan, who does he call? Does he call, I don't know, J.D. Vance or Trump to come in and talk about it? No, he calls Dave fucking Smith, a stand-up comedian and libertarian podcaster. That's who he calls to come in and give the true American breakdown as to what we just witnessed, what we just experienced. I don't think people understand how big what Dave is doing is. I'm going to get into it a little bit because I've got Tom Woods on in the second half of this episode, and he and I talk about this towards the tail end of our conversation, but I just want to really emphasize how special what Dave is doing is right now. And yes, he's my friend, and yes, I owe him a lot for all the help he's provided me. That's not why I'm saying this. I promise you that. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I genuinely think that what Dave is accomplishing, what he has accomplished since he decided not to run for the presidency under the Libertarian Party, has far outpaced what he could have likely achieved had he ran. That's a pretty bold statement, and I think it's like empirically true. I can't say it's empirically true because I can't prove what he would have done had he ran for president, and I think he probably would have made major waves had he done that. But without doing that, I feel as if he is accomplishing arguably more than he could have had he been running. He was on with Patrick Bet-David doing the live stream coverage of the election. He then catches a red eye, I assume, maybe he flew in the first thing in the morning, lands in Austin, hops into Alex Jones' studio, does an hour or whatever it was over there, and then immediately kicks it over to the Joe Rogan Experience. I mean, he talked to 20 million people in a matter of 48 hours. And what is the message that he wants to convey there? War is bad. If you think that's not a big deal, I don't think you're paying attention. And I make this argument to Tom in the interview that I did with him, but I genuinely think that Dave is on the cusp of surpassing Ron Paul in terms of what he was able to accomplish. And again, this is a bold claim, so let me explain why I think that's possible. There was a major push from myself and Dave and everybody else that's in our world, clamoring, screaming, you cannot have a Nikki Haley, Mike Pompeo-led State Department, CIA, whatever Trump was thinking about doing with these people. And because of our pressure, in my opinion, not necessarily ours, but like the collective MAGA world pressure against those candidates, Trump went a different direction. He sends out a Truth Social post and he says, look, I'm not going with Haley or Pompeo. I appreciate them, but we got to go a different direction. While that is being announced, Dave tweets out, it's not enough to just throw a wall up to Haley and the Pompeos of the world. we actually have to have no neocons in the cabinet. None. And who, of all people, quote tweets that? Donald Trump Jr., the son of the president-elect. And he says, I'm on it, 100%. Now, there has been news over the past 24 hours that leads me to believe Donald Trump Jr. is losing that fight right now. In my opinion, it's our job to lend him credibility, to lend him support in his claim to his father that, hey, this is not popular at all amongst your base. You don't have to go this path. And maybe he will have enough leverage to keep some of these more atrocious candidates out. The latest being reports from I think it was the New York Post, put out that they have people that are around the campaign are saying that Marco Rubio has been selected for Secretary of State. Now, I don't think I need to convince you guys that Marco Rubio is not an America First guy, okay? He has also been very critical of Donald Trump, calling him a con man over and over again.
The stakes are giving control of the party of Lincoln and Reagan, of the conservative movement, and ultimately of the United States over to a con artist. That will not happen. I make this promise to you today. I will do whatever it takes. I will campaign as long as it takes. I will stay in this race as long as it takes.
I don't know why Donald Trump would do that in terms of, like, do you want loyalty? Well, he's not very loyal. Do you want someone who will actually try and get us out of wars? Marco Rubio has rarely seen a war he isn't all in for. He's extraordinarily hawkish when it comes to China and Iran in particular. It doesn't seem as if it jives with his campaign promises. However, a fact that we always have to keep in the back of our heads is Miriam Adelson, whose number one goal is the defense of Israel. She shipped $100 million to Donald Trump to get him elected. So there's no doubt in my mind, Donald Trump is going to do things and appoint people that are in alignment with her worldview and her preferences. That is an inevitability. The puritanical libertarians out there that have already been chastising me, oh, look what he's doing. Ha! You fool. Look, I'm not naive. I know exactly what we're up against, and I know that Trump is going to make good on some of those promises to the Adelsons. That's a fact. Do you think it would have been much different, or maybe even worse, if Kamala Harris was the president? Like, do you think that she would have been like, Israel, you're on your own? No. That wasn't going to happen either. So we have to, we are working in the land of the imperfect. Okay? That's what politics are. So if you want to take your little victory lap and say, oh, I'm so pure and I didn't vote for Donald Trump and therefore this is all on you. Okay, fine. Put the blame on me. I don't really give a shit. That's not what I'm in the game of. I'm in the game of, can we influence them to be better than the alternative? And I think the answer to that is yes. I think we can. And there has been the latest reports. Anna Paulina Luna says, my understanding is that there has been no pick made for Secretary of State. So what I think is happening is I think that Donald Trump is floating out names. He is not himself confirming these names. It's just being reported on. And then MAGA world erupts and they say, what the fuck is this? This is not what we signed up for. And then he gives you a 20% better option. This is a perfect example, is with the leadership of the Senate race that's happening this week. In fact, tomorrow or Wednesday, I think. So tomorrow. They are trying to do a vote in secret, and apparently Trump and Tucker Carlson, Vivek, the senators I do like, and Mike Lee and Rand Paul, they're saying that Scott out of Florida, he's the guy. We got to get him in there as the leader of the Senate. Okay, I don't know. I don't love the guy. He's pushed red flag laws. I'm not super fond of him by any stretch of the imagination, but on the alternative is Thune and Cornyn, who are just straight up swamp monsters, really nothing beneficial to add. They're just the heir apparents to Mitch McConnell's of the world. You don't want that. So, if you're going to be a puritanical libertarian on these issues, well, then Scott sucks too, right? But obviously, the preferred option of the three on offer, I would rather it be Mike Lee or Rand Paul, obviously. But I could shout those names into the wind and get nothing, or I can add my name to the growing chorus of people saying Scott's the guy. And maybe that's enough to shift the votes, because as of the first announcement of this secret vote, Thune was the favorite. Now the betting markets have Scott as the favorite. So this is the game that we're actually in. If you want to play it, this is how you play it. If you just want to say my hands are clean, I didn't vote, it ought to be Rand Paul, and just say that and then have it not happen, you can do that. It's your prerogative. But I'm actually in the game of like, can we marginally improve Trump's cabinet and Trump's second presidential term over the first? I think the answer is yes, we can. But we have to be willing to deal in the imperfect. Marco Rubio as Secretary of State would be a disaster. Is Anthony Blinken good? No. I'd say he's at least as much of a warmonger as Marco Rubio, as evidenced by all of the wars that are happening right now. So, like, this is actually what we're dealing with is not perfect. We're not dealing with our ideal. We are dealing with what is the alternative. I could have voted for the Libertarian candidate. Okay. And then Trump would still be the president anyways. Okay. So like now we have a significant influence. We have Donald Trump Jr. in our orbit. We have Vivek in our orbit. We have RFK Jr. in our orbit. They're all in Donald Trump Sr.'s orbit. Should we be using our leverage, our influence, our audiences to try and scream the senators into voting for Scott? Or should we just say, none of these three guys are perfect, therefore we're not going to say anything about it? We're going to just say, oh, we hate all these guys. My answer is I'm going to try and get the best of the options on offer. A lot of you are going to hate me for it. A lot of people are going to be like, that's not libertarian. Okay. I've accepted my fate. I am in this to actually improve things on the margins. That is not getting me to anarcho-capistan. It's not happening. But it might avoid World War III. It might. It might get justice for some of the people responsible for the 2020 era. It might. It might. It might get some of the DEI, ESG stuff out of academia, out of corporate America. It might. In fact, I think it will. So that's really what I'm striving towards. And if you're interested in that, if you're interested in seeing genuine change on the margins, I think we have an actual opportunity to do that. So now let me get back to Dave. In a matter of 48 hours, Dave is doing all this, and he has Donald Trump Jr. That is quote tweeting him saying he's on it and that he's going to keep all the neocons out. Probably going to fail. Let's just be honest. Probably going to fail. There's going to be some neocons in there. There's no doubt about that. And let's be honest, there's also some tactical reasons that you might want to do that. Like if you're negotiating and if you're interested in peace, you may want some lunatics a la John Bolton around just so you could say, I'm better than this guy. You want to deal with this guy? You can deal with me. This is what Trump said was the silver lining of having John Bolton around. More puritanical libertarians go, that's bullshit. Screw John Bolton. I don't want him anywhere. I don't want him anywhere around them either. But I do understand from a businessman negotiating standpoint, like that there is a rationale there. That does make sense. Do you want to negotiate peace with me? Because I got John Bolton on the other line, and we can go the hard way if you like. Like in geopolitics, there is some value to that. But obviously, my preference would be Colonel Douglas McGregor. Like that's who I actually want as Secretary of Defense or some position high up that could actually avoid some of these wars, that actually understands them intimately. Like that would be my preference. If that option isn't on offer, I'm going to have to deal in the imperfect. I'm going to have to deal with option A out of a list of B, C, D being apocalyptic. Sorry. Like someone's got to tell you the truth. That's what politics is in this current iteration. We are trying to move them 5, 10%, 15% closer to us, and therefore move their electorate, the MAGA faithful, 10, 15% closer to us too, which I think has already happened to a large extent. And then you move it again, another 10, 15% 2 years from now, and another 10, 15% 2 years from now. Like you have to have a little bit of a long time horizon on this. Little, delayed gratification, low time preference, if you will, to put it in Austrian terms. Like this is actually how you make progress. And to get back to my very bold claim that I think that Dave Smith is on the cusp of surpassing Ron Paul in terms of accomplishments, Dr. Paul made his name by being Dr. No. He voted no against everything, and he passed very little, and I appreciate him for it, and he's a legend for it. Like, that's the truth. He is. He's an absolute fucking legend for it, and he's a saint. But in terms of, like, passing legislation, he didn't pass much. Most of the stuff he authored never got passed, and the Fed, audit the Fed, like, it didn't happen, okay? We have an opportunity through Dave and our little orbit of influencers, whatever I'm part of here, to genuinely influence policy on a federal level that gets implemented. Not just ideas, not just words, not just hearts and minds, but actually changing policy at the federal level. Doing it with a microphone and nothing else. Not a singular no vote in Congress as Ron Paul did, and God bless him for it, but just talking and convincing enough millions of people over a 48-hour period, and then getting the Sun's president to quote tweet you saying, "I'm on it, no neocons." That is enough to actually change some of the cabinet appointments that will be in positions of extreme importance in Donald Trump's, cabinet in his orbit. Like, that is huge, huge progress for us. And I think people are sleeping on it. I do. Like, does it mean that we will accomplish it? No. Does it mean that we will accomplish all of it? Definitely not. Like, we're definitely not going to get everything we want. That's a fact. But we have a chance to get some things that we want when we've gotten nothing ever, ever. Do you see why that's an improvement? I hope this logic checks out for you guys, because I think I'm right. We've never gotten shit, ever. They've never even thought to try and pander to us because we were so fucking unimportant. They never gave us anything. They never lied to us even. They were just like, you don't matter. We matter now. They came to our convention. Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running for president, debated me, for God's sakes. We definitely matter. RFK Jr. was there. Donald Trump was there. They want us to vote for them. They want our support. That means that our voices matter now. Our voices matter when it comes to his approval ratings, when it comes to how the whole MAGA world and community responds. And it's not just us. It's not just the libertarians. There are genuine Trump supporters that are fucking furious about Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, or as John Thune as the head of the Senate. Like, they are not that different from us. They don't want endless wars. They want the government to be cut back. They want prosecutions and genuine investigations into the lockdown era. They do. So we can work with them, as imperfect as they are and we are, I might add. Or we can just say, we're better than you. We're more pure. And we can get fucking nothing done ever. You choose. You get to be more pure than me. Congrats. I offer you that. I offer you a more pure voting record than I have now. I have now voted for a winning president. It feels strange. I'll be the first to admit it. And it's going to be not even close to my ideals. But I am not giving up. This is very early days. And yes, his cabinet matters tremendously. But he also was the least militaristic president in my lifetime. And he did that with John Psycho Blood-Soaked Monster Bolton in his cabinet. So just because he's appointing Marco Rubio does not mean, reportedly, it looks like that may be false, as I said earlier. But just because he's appointing Marco Rubio to Secretary of State, or if he does, that does not necessarily mean that he will not deliver on his promises. Now, if he fails, if he actually starts a war, well, yeah, obviously this has all been a ruse. And they have used us. They've used me, if you're one of the pure ones that didn't vote for him. Okay, I'll admit that. Like, I'm totally fine with that. But until that happens, I'm going to continue to use my influence to try and sway him and them and his orbit as much and as hard as I possibly can. Because that's what matters right now. It's not about, oh, I'm better than you, I didn't do this. That's not what it's about. It's about, can we get them 10, 15, 20% better? I think we can. Don't stop. Make your voices heard. Don't just be black-pilled and give up and, it's just the duopoly. And okay, yeah, look, maybe you'll end up being right. But until you are, for sure, it's still worth voicing your preferences, your concerns, what you want to see. I promise you, these people are paying attention. serious attention to what we want. It was going to be Mike Pompeo and Nikki Haley. It is not them because of us. Not me, all of us. If we continue to lend our voices in unison to demand improvements in his cabinet, we will get improvements. It will not be perfect, but it will be better. And if that's something that you would like to strive towards, I welcome you. And I hope that you will lend your voice in support of mine and we can actually get after it. Because we ain't got much time left. We are on the cusp of $50 trillion in national debt. It is a stone's throw away. Very, very close. We happen to also be in multiple proxy wars and one with the largest nuclear power on Earth. We don't have fucking time to waste. We don't have time to do this purity spiral bullshit. We have to actually stop World War III. Like, do I have to explain how important that is? I shouldn't have to. That's my mind frame. That's my outlook. I just wanted to express it as directly to you as I possibly could so that I could stop with the look, it's got to be Rubio. Look how fucking stupid you are. Like these tweets that I'm getting from people. It's like, God, really? Is that what matters to you? Like, are you more happy that I was wrong than you are upset that Marco Rubio might be the Secretary of State? Like, what are your priorities? Like, I think that's really what people ought to be asking themselves. Like, what are you prioritizing? Do you want to be right and pure, or do you want to stop World War III? Do you want to stop the national debt implosion that's imminent and the confettiing of our dollar? What's your actual end goal here? That's what everybody ought to be asking themselves. Are you in this to actually improve the world? Yeah, I am. I know I'm just one dude speaking into a microphone. It seems fucking far-fetched. Dave Smith is just one dude speaking into a microphone, and he is changing the fucking world. And he cannot be alone in that fight. And I will not let him be alone in that fight. And you shouldn't either. We should all be fucking circling the wagons. Get after it. We have an opportunity here. Don't let it fucking slip through your fingers with some puritanical, nonsensical spiraling. It's fucking stupid. It's a waste of your time. I promise you. I did it for a long time. I did it for most of my life. We have an opportunity here. It's the best opportunity we've ever had. Let's see what we can make of it. That's all I'm asking. All right. Let's get into my interview with the great Tom Woods. He has the Tom Woods Show. He's written a dozen books or something crazy amount. I've read 3 of them. He's a great guy. Absolute wealth of knowledge. If you don't know the Tom Woods Show, you ought to be subscribed to it. If you don't know Tom Woods, well, you're about to find out. Guy's brilliant. We get into the tariffs argument because I wanted to basically use him as a soundboard to bounce my ideas off of him as to, like, is this feasible? Could we actually replace the income tax with tariffs? I'll save you the answer. I'll let him give it to you, and I think you'll enjoy this conversation. It was very informative, and appreciate you guys. If you're sick of the headache of health insurance, well, boy, have I got a company for you, because that's exactly why Crowd Health was created. It's not health insurance. It's a better way to pay for health care through crowdfunding. So stop sending money to big insurance companies who profit off of not paying your bills and check out Crowd Health. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you'll get access to a community of people who are willing to help out in the event of an emergency. You'll get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more without doctors' networks getting in the way. And of course, you'll join the crowd, a group of members just like you who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months by using code LOCKDOWN at joincrowdhealth.com. Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code LOCKDOWN.
In fact, we should probably make a video, you, me, and Dave. Vivek, we love you. Don't make us change.
Don't break my heart, Vivek. Yeah. I can't handle it.
Yeah, I know. We could sing, to the tune of "Don't Go Breaking My Heart" by Elton John and Kiki D. All right. Well,
let's
ready when you are.
All libertarians oppose taxation. Tariffs are a tax, and therefore libertarians oppose tariffs. I have never really given serious thought to tariffs because they are taxes, and I'm just like, well, I don't like taxes, and I haven't dug much deeper than that. Sure, I've read some of our greats in this arena, but that's kind of the depth of my knowledge. I'm much more in the Fed policy, interest rate policy lane, And obviously, Donald Trump made major news by talking about perhaps, which is unlikely to happen, but perhaps getting rid of the income tax and moving to a tariff-based tax a la the late 1800s. He said this on the Joe Rogan Experience. So today I have on the great Tom Woods to tell me why tariffs in any form are bad, or perhaps if this is a workable plan. So what are you thinking, Tom?
Well, okay, first of all, if I really felt like I was being presented with a plan whereby we would ditch income taxation and replace it with tariffs, and I knew for a fact that that was what was going to happen, I would probably be on board for that. I would consider that a marginal improvement. And you may think that my reasons are self-interested or unconvincing, but for one thing, I feel like I, as an individual, I would have much, much less imposition on my time and labor in preparing taxes, and I would have far less intrusion into my privacy and private life and where I'm earning my income and all the different sources and having to track every last thing. And I would rather avoid that if I could. Also, there are limits to how high tariffs can go, because eventually they get so high that they become protective tariffs. Now, for some Trumpers, that's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, that's the goal.
There are a lot of products people do want to buy, and if you try to levy 100% tariff on them, they'll very reluctantly buy the domestic version, but that's not a long-term strategy. I mean, you're not going to become competitive on the world stage by doing that. You're going to encourage your domestic industry to be inefficient and lousy. But anyway, but the whole point of this thing is, first of all, I don't believe that's what would happen. I think what would happen is we would still have income taxation, and then we would also have a bunch of tariffs on top of that.
Right.
Which I think is, practically speaking, what's more likely to happen, which is why I would be concerned about it. Now, I come to you, Clint, not as somebody who has TDS. You know that.
True.
I'm not somebody who automatically rejects something just because Trump recommends it. I'm not one of those people. But I don't like the tariff stuff, even though I will say that the main reason I argue against tariffs is really the main libertarian reason, which is that it's a destructive thing to do to the economy. We'll get to that in a minute. But there are other arguments that I don't address directly. I mean, I suppose I could, and I have addressed on the Tom Woods Show, like it's better for us not to be dependent on potentially hostile forces for necessities in case of a war. And so it's good for us to be self-sufficient. Or another argument is we can use the threat of, in effect, closing American markets to force recalcitrant trade partners to liberalize their policies so as to allow Americans to sell more to them. And now that's a different argument from we're going to use tariffs to save American manufacturing. That was really the main thing we were told was the virtue of these things, that we'll save American manufacturing with them. Now, it's interesting. Our friend Gene Epstein, who is the who runs the Soho Forum in New York, and he moderates debates, he participated in a debate at the Soho Forum with economist Stephen Moore. And Steve Moore worked with Trump for a little while in the White House. And Moore is a free trader, no doubt about it. But he was arguing in that debate that actually Trump could very well wind up doing more good than harm with his particular tariffs because he was using them, he said, as leverage to get other countries to open up to American exports. And he said, now, initially, I went in there as a free trade purist, and I said, you're full of it, and this is all wrong. But then I observed with my own eyes that it was a useful negotiating tool. So again, that's a strategic question we can argue with back and forth. But it's worth noting that when Gene tried arguing against that, he actually lost the debate. I don't know if Gene's going to listen to this episode, Clint, but he lost that debate. Steve Moore won that debate in front of basically an audience of libertarians.
That's
but
fascinating.
my main concern is I think it's a false promise. I don't think you're going to save American manufacturing this way. But secondly, I think I understand why people have a kind of a nostalgic attachment to manufacturing, because they think, well, that means we're making things, and I know that making things is better than not making things. But at this point, manufacturing amounts to 7% of all jobs in the U.S. Now, I mean, that's a small number. It used to be 37. So I would just start with, we have to explain why this fetish for just this 7% of the economy, that we would want to rearrange everything in order to accommodate simply that.
Well,
I'll give you one. I'll let you jump in a second. I know it's your own show, but
no, please.
If I don't finish this point, I'm going to forget it. Which is that there's other manufacturing, though, that would be hurt by tariffs that are supposed to protect manufacturing. So, for example, I gave the example in a recent post on X, in which I said, it's true that you could perhaps save some jobs in the steel industry by putting a high tariff on imported steel. There are 140,000 jobs in the steel industry. And you could very well say, see, look, those jobs are still there. And why? Because of this tariff I implemented. The problem with that is, apart from the fact that it's not making American steel competitive to give it this kind of special advantage, but the real issue is there are 2 million American jobs that involve manufacturing that requires steel as one of its inputs. And now suddenly all these firms have to deal with a sudden artificial rise in the price of steel. And this will harm the marginal producers. And the employees of these marginal firms will lose their jobs. But nobody will know that that's why they lost their jobs.
I'm
Those are
blanking
just
on the name of
statistics.
I'm blanking on the name of the economist. I'm sure you'll remember. The seen versus the unseen. Which one?
Frederick Bastiat.
Bastiat, yes. So the
This is a
unseen,
perfect example.
Yeah, the
Perfect
unseen
example
are the jobs that you lose on the inside, on the inverse of this.
Exactly. Because what's seen is, of course, we can see with our physical eyes the jobs that are quote unquote protected by these tariffs. But what we have to see with our mind's eye, because our physical eyes fail us here, are the other jobs that would be lost, but that won't be earmarked in the same way.
Right.
You know, these steel jobs were earmarked by the tariff, and we know that they're going to get special protection. But who knows about all these other jobs that are just spread out throughout the economy? That'll just be some inexplicable rise in unemployment that nobody can account for. So that's a problem.
Well, the way the BLS does employment statistics these days, all of the jobs are unseen because they just continue to manipulate the figures to confuse everything. But all right, so I'm gonna steelman some oppositional points, because I have actually made this argument on my show, not knowing about Gene Epstein's experience debating this topic, that I do think that, if we're going to advocate on behalf of a free market, well, doesn't it make sense to use whatever leverage we have to try and beat down oppositional tariffs that are on our goods that we're exporting to people? I mean, if you look at Europe, if you look at much of the world, you have extraordinary tariffs that are levied against American products, which make it completely uncompetitive for us to export our goods there. On the flip of that, we import a ton of their goods. So they want to sell into our market. It seems very likely that they would relent and they would drop their tariffs in order for us to be able to export some of our goods and to compete a little bit more readily. Is that not advocating? Yes, it's using state power, but is it because we're already dealing with state intervention in the tariffs that exist from our oppositional side? Is that not kind of getting us into a better place to have a negotiating chip that the president can go sit down with Emmanuel Macron and say, hey, I don't want to do this, but champagne is now tariffed unless you drop the tariffs on American automobiles, for instance.
Yeah, now I don't dispute that it's conceivable that could work out. But it's also conceivable that a trade war can go on for an extended period of time.
Yep.
That it can actually go on for years. And in the past sometimes has gone on for years. And then we have a problem. And I should also note, this is especially acute at a time when consumer prices are rising. Now, you may say that the rate at which they are rising is lower than it was a year and a half ago or something, but they're still rising faster than we'd like. And people are complaining about this. Well, you're not. There's no way you're going to reverse that by imposing a tariff on the inputs that everybody needs to use to produce their goods. That's not going to. We want to get the most inexpensive inputs we can. So even if there's a country that is being stupidly belligerent in their trade policy, if the result of it is we get inexpensive inputs for our manufacturing here, why don't we just take them?
Right.
You know, I mean, there's a pretty good argument for that. Why don't we just take those inexpensive inputs rather than say, well, maybe 2 years from now I'll force them to back down. It's another 2 years of people having to deal with rising prices. I'd rather get low-cost inputs now.
Sure.
Rather than gamble on, well, how good of a negotiating stance will our trade negotiators have? I don't know.
Well, I think that my concern is that, the statistics that you brought up earlier, that it used to be 37% or whatever it was that was manufacturing jobs, and now it's down to single digits. It's like, well, that is the argument for tariffs. I mean, that's what Trump is going to argue is that, hey, the reason that we're getting our lunch eaten is because they are protecting their industries and we're not protecting ours. I mean, that's what they're going to say to you. So what would you respond to?
Yeah, well, manufacturing is also falling in China. It falls everywhere
because
true. Of productivity improvements.
Right.
So we don't need as many physical people doing it. So it's the same process that occurred in agriculture. We don't need 98% of the public to be engaged in agriculture. And so we have, for example, I understand that we think of manufacturing as being the backbone of the middle class, that you can have a good middle class income in manufacturing. But the thing is, there are huge swaths of the American economy where you can earn as much or more. Like in construction, we have something like 7 million construction jobs, and they generally pay better than in manufacturing. But for some reason, we don't have this weird attachment to those jobs, even though they're by and large better jobs. Or the household sector has at least 6 million jobs that pay better. We have 1 million jobs in oil and gas extraction, same thing. And we have probably 50 plus million people who are in management positions or professional occupations that are in the non-manufacturing part of the private sector. They're all earning at least middle-class income. So for 75 years, the share of the U.S. economy devoted to manufacturing has been declining. Regardless of what the trade policy has been, regardless of what domestic policy we've had, none of it. It's like trying to stop COVID with a mask.
Right.
It's going to just do its thing regardless of what you do, because it's just natural. It's just the way life works. So are we going to impose what I think harms us? It certainly harms consumers, and it harms a whole lot of unnamed people in employment on behalf of a 7% that has been declining through benign forces for 3/4 of a century.
Today, I want to tell you about our sponsor, Monetary Metals. Gold prices have been breaking all-time highs in 2024, and now you can get your gold to work for you, generating interest income every month paid in additional ounces of physical gold. You can earn up to 5% on your gold and silver in their lease offerings, and accredited investors can earn double-digit returns in their bond offerings. Again, all the interest is paid in ounces, which are stored for free on your behalf. So, if you're tired of your gold and silver collecting dust at home, or worse, racking up fees having your metal professionally stored, check out monetary-metals.com/lockdown to learn how you can start putting your metals to work today. Again, that's monetary-metals.com/lockdown. Well, that's a really compelling argument. Let me give you one more, oppositional argument and see what you think about it, because this is one that I've thought about myself. That yes, I agree with you that as you go through the industrialization process, eventually you move into more of a service-based economy or creation economy, as opposed to just nuts and bolts type of stuff. But because the U.S. dollar has the reserve currency status via the Cantillon effect, essentially, like, you're always going to have, if you are the reserve currency country, you're going to have maximal purchasing power from the U.S. dollar domestically. Well, let me pause there and just ask you: do you think that's accurate? First off, that because we have the printing press and we have access to the dollars first and at the lowest interest rates, most you would assume, that in fact inflationary pressures are felt globally worse than they are felt domestically, or no?
I think they're lower domestically than they would be otherwise. We'll say that.
Yeah. So the reason I bring that up is that if you want to maintain the reserve currency status, it seems to me that you are basically expediting the hollowing out of the kind of middle class in America. And I know middle class has been synonymous with industry. It doesn't have to be. It probably shouldn't at this point, but that's how a lot of people view it. And I'm just concerned that, like, I think the libertarian answer here is, well, we shouldn't be the reserve currency. Any of the deleterious consequences that come from that beneficial position are just the price you pay to be that you're able to now borrow and spend more than any other country on earth, deal with the consequences of that. But for the middle class in this country, they're looking at it, they don't think in this realm at all. I mean, if we're being honest, like, they're not going to think about any of this higher level stuff. But do you think that it's kind of inevitable that if you are the U.S., like if you are the global reserve currency, that you are essentially going to be in this position where almost everything gets produced outside of your land mass? I know that was a very complicated question, but I hope it makes sense.
I'm not sure that has to follow.
Okay.
But I would have to sit down and plot that one out. I'm not sure it has to follow that that in an arrangement where you have a fiat currency that operates as a reserve currency, and it just means that in practical terms, it means that it's widely used, or it's used in a bunch of places, and it's accepted and used in a lot of international transactions because it is noted for its stability compared to others.
Yeah.
But
70% of global trade is U.S. dollars from what I've read.
Right.
So it's a lot.
But it could just be my inability to comprehend all this, but I don't think that necessarily, even if it did lead to that outcome, then I feel like once you understand how a market economy works, you realize that every time there's an attempt to manipulate it, to shift it around, to try to stop this, what is perceived to be an undesirable phenomenon from occurring, that you're basically playing whack-a-mole, because every one of these things that you hit winds up creating another problem that wasn't there before. And then you hit that problem, and then there's another problem. So that's what I'm talking about with regard to the use of tariffs. Yeah, I understand that, for example, that there's already intervention in the global economy, and that there are other countries that have tariffs that are interrupting the free flow of international trade. And so we want to whack that mole. But the problem is then it turns out that we're actually harming ourselves, and not just because of likely trade retaliation, which, by the way, I know it's fashionable these days to say the Smoot-Hawley tariff worked. The trade retaliation against that was widespread and in a huge number of industries. It was not a minor thing. But even if we didn't get any of that somehow, we miraculously avoid that, we still have the problem of we're crippling ourselves by artificially propping up certain prices in the U.S. economy of things we need to produce the consumer goods whose high prices we are all complaining about. So it's like no matter what we do, every mole we hit pops up another one. So I feel like even if we try to, even if, as you're suggesting, you could come up with a scenario that, well, because of the United States' unique position, it needs to impose this policy. The policy, it seems to me, seems self-defeating. And so that for every problem it seems like it solves, it's creating three more problems.
Yeah. No, I understand that logic. That does make a lot of sense to me. It's just I guess I really want to get rid of the income tax, and I'm trying to figure out a way that this makes more sense. And in fairness, I do think that it probably would be preferable just for privacy purposes, as you said earlier.
Yeah, I would rather have it.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, from my understanding, our GDP, or like our total consumption, is somewhere around 30 trillion in America, and only 10% of that is actually imported goods. So if you could truly get rid of the income tax and replace it just with tariffs on that 10% of total consumption in America, well, that seems like a trade-off worth making. But I don't think you could actually do that, because you need to bring in, I mean, the way they're spending right now, you need to bring in $3, $4, $5, $6 trillion worth of taxes through tariffs.
That's
Good luck.
The issue.
Like, ain't happening, brother. So you got to cut the government. Then you could actually get back to a tariffs-based, funding model, but we're nowhere near what size of government we were in the late 1800s. So,
and that's what the problem is. That's why we can't. Unfortunately, we can't immediately do this. Is that we're going to try to do it while still wanting to maintain the spending levels that we have now. They were able to do it in the 1800s because, as Ron Paul would say, they had a different philosophy of government back then.
Exactly.
And yeah, they would not be. And the way tariffs work is that if you think, well, we're not generating enough revenue, we'll just raise them. The more you raise them, the less people, the less likely people are to pay them, because they will look for alternatives to the taxed goods. And so if whereas income tax,
it's a Laffer curve of tariffs.
It is a Laffer curve of tariffs. With income tax, I think you can go higher and higher and higher, and people they keep working because they want money in general. But I don't need that particular kind of car. So I could just absolutely cut that out entirely.
Right.
And then where are they? They can't make, so maybe they could put a 10% tariff or a 20 or a 30. But once they get to 40, 50, 60, thinking they're going to get more money, they're not. And I think the Laffer curve, as we're calling it, for international trade, I would say that probably appears much faster than it does with the income tax.
Makes sense to me. All right. Do you have a few more minutes? I got to ask you one more thing.
Yeah, ask me anything you want.
All right. So I'm sure you saw the quote tweet from the president-elect's son of our good friend, Mr. Davey Smith, that happened yesterday. And I wanted to float a concept past you. And I just knowing you as well as I do at this point, I have a feeling you've been thinking the same thing. First off, it's unfucking believably cool that this is happening. I know. It's so novel to just see like a guy I know really well. I got to talk to Don Jr. for an hour out in Iowa before IRL started. Josie and I did. I got to talk to the guy. I talked to him about a bunch of stuff that it was off the record, so I won't give details. But he's not too far away from us. I know people won't believe me. They'll think I've sold out or whatever. Like, no, this dude is pretty red-pilled.
I've been reasonably impressed with him from what I've been able to glean.
Yeah, well, and I'm telling you, off the record, off the mic, he is even more one of us. Like, I really like him a lot. So anyway, setting that aside, what I was thinking to myself is, like, Dr. Ron Paul, the great Ron Paul, the legend himself, he made his name by being Dr. No, by basically not getting much past, but just saying no to everything and holding the line, so to speak. But almost the government, grew tremendously during his tenure. I feel as if we are seeing a new iteration of Ron Paul in Dave Smith through a microphone, not through wielding hard power of a vote in Congress, but rather through soft power of just being influential. And I'm not sure that Dave won't actually be able to get more done than Ron Paul did in Congress for decades. And I'm just thinking, what are your thoughts on that? Am I totally swinging out of my shoes here? Does that seem like a possibility at this point?
Well, I'll say this. He is on every large program. I mean, he's just been on everything. He's been on everything you'd want to be on. He's been on, and everybody likes him. I mean, every host of these shows loves having Dave Smith on because they know it'll be entertaining and interesting, and that, he'll sound kind of like some of the Trump people they have on, but not entirely. And he'll be way different in areas where the hosts themselves feel like Dave's probably the one who's right here. And to watch him, he's good at it. He's good at it too. I mean, I think that's, we can't discount that. It's not happenstance. I never do. Yeah, I mean, it's not happenstance that this has happened. I mean, he's really good. And also he's funny and engaging, and he knows the details too. Like, he really spends time learning the material. So if he's going to do a debate, the other side better be ready, because Dave is ready.
He was on the arguably, maybe not the largest, but one of the largest live streams during the presidential election. He then catches a red eye, gets on InfoWars with Alex Jones the next day, and then that night is on with Joe Rogan, the largest show in the world. I mean, in a 48-hour period, he reaches, 20-something million people, and then he's getting quote tweeted by the son of the president of the United States the next day, and then he's basically galvanizing what you would think would not be our movement, but kind of is at this point, where he's saying, hey, it's fantastic that Haley and Pompeo are kept out. That's not enough. And then Don Jr. is just like, I got you, brother. We're going way harder than this. And I'm like, this is a fucking legendary run. Excuse my language, but this is a 72-hour stretch that pales in comparison to anything I've ever seen. And I'm just sitting here like, this is miraculous. I mean, Dave had the opportunity to easily get the nomination and run for president, but it's so crystal clear that this was the better route to go, that his influence has grown far more, in my opinion, than had he run for the presidency. And I might add, had he ran, there's a decent chance that Kamala Harris is the president of the United States right now. So how you like all that?
Yeah, and I agree with every single thing you said, that a lot of us were disappointed when he didn't run, but it turned out to be the best decision he could have made. And not to mention, he has a lot of things to say that people on the right need to hear. Now, everybody needs to hear, but people on the right need to be corrected on some of their, some of their problematic. I hate using the word problem. Ditch that word. On some of their incorrect views. And he is a really good guy to correct them because he's not lecturing them. He's not calling them names. Like, they'll listen to a guy like Dave Smith, and that's really important. And he wouldn't have been able to do that if he had run, let's say, he'd run on the Libertarian Party ticket. He would have got enough attention that Trump would have given him a name. One of those nicknames like Lil Marco or whatever. Yeah. And that would have stuck with him forever.
Dim Dave. Dim Dave.
Right. And then that would have stuck with him. It would have been impossible from that moment on for him ever to crack into a world that needs to hear what he has to say. And you may have noticed that Bill Kristol, you remember the guy? I now think of Bill Kristol not as the publisher of the old Weekly Standard or the frequent cable TV news commentator, but as the guy who lost a debate to Scott Horton. I think of him that way.
Me too.
Bill Kristol pounced when Donald Trump Jr. quote tweeted Dave and pointed out, oh, well, look at Dave. 3 months ago, he was anti-Israel or some stupid thing like that. And the response to that was overwhelming. Like, Bill, your day is over, Bill. It's over. Like, no one cares about what – you don't even get invited on MSNBC anymore. Like, no one even cares about your neocon views. So Bill's post criticizing Dave – got something like 250 likes.
Right.
Dave responded and got 38,000 likes. Like, Bill, it's over. Okay, you're the crank now.
It's a new era, brother. I mean,
that's right.
Yeah.
We're dictating the agenda now, not you, Bill. We're cleaning up the mess you made.
It's truly amazing. I think for the younger libertarians out there that feel like this is normal, this is not normal.
This is not normal.
We are kicking the shit out of neocons in public, in their territory. Not only that, but all of the conservative thought leaders, like the real conservative thought leaders, the Tucker Carlsons, the Candace Owens, they're all personal friends with Dave Smith at this point, and they all sound almost exactly like him when it comes to foreign policy, like really, really close. So I think I've struggled to deal with the amount of optimism that I've had over the past week. I have never in my life been so hopeful and optimistic about politics in my lifetime. And I'm so accustomed to being pessimistic that I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Have you dealt with that at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm actually lowering my expectations because I don't want to be disappointed. I don't really think, for example, like, I'm not actually optimistic that they're really going to cut spending. I don't think anybody cares about spending. I mean, yeah, I know Elon Musk might cut some government employees or something. I really am skeptical about that. Sure. But I've decided that nobody cares about that, so that's just not happening. So now I'll move on to the next thing that I care about.
Right.
But I do want to say one more thing about Dave, if I may, which is how gracious he is in this situation. I know somebody, maybe I'll tell you his name off the air, you probably know him, who very, very quickly skyrocketed to the top in terms of media attention and popularity, and then had a dramatic fall. And I'm not talking about Milo. It's somebody else. And once he made that, once he broke through and became a bit of a phenomenon, he forgot all about his friends. It really was the old story. He forgot all about his friends because he's a fancy person now, and he moves in all these fancy circles. He doesn't need them anymore. And not only is Dave not that way, he still texts, a lowlife like me, Exactly. I still talk to him. But beyond that, he gets on these shows and he builds up his friends.
Right.
He'll say, Scott Horton has the classic book on this. It's already a classic, hasn't even come out yet. And you really should talk to him. Like Dave will do, or he's debating Chris Cuomo. He brings my book and puts it on the table and says, you should read this.
I was there for that, by the way.
Oh, were you? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I was in the audience.
I think I was at a concert or something. I think I was seeing Earth, Wind, and Fire and Lionel Richie that night.
I was sitting back row in the right, but I remember seeing your book and I was like, this is so awesome. By the way, I just got to point out that is a knock-on effect. I think Dave probably is this type of person anyways, but that is a major knock-on effect of his relationship to Joe Rogan. Because what has Joe Rogan done? He has brought all of his friends up with him. He has turned all of them into superstars. That's exactly what Dave's trying to do because he feels that same sort of gratitude towards Rogan, and he's trying to be the same guy, in my opinion. And I think and also I just think he's a good person and he wants to help where he can. And he realizes, like, yeah, a lot of these ideas I got from these guys. Am I going to leave them behind? Like, of course not.
Yeah. So I feel like it couldn't happen to a more deserving guy, and it happened in part because he seized every opportunity that came his way. And by that, I mean he had opportunities to debate people that he seized upon and took them and did it. And those debates, either the debates themselves went viral or clips of the debates went viral. So then people started seeing him. He'd been on Rogan all this time, so that doesn't hurt. And so, but all of a sudden, in your feed, whatever platform you're on, but these days it's X, I suppose, is where all the normal people are. You keep seeing this same guy over and over. And you think, well, why am I not talking to him?
Yep. No, and just to prove your point that he hasn't left any of us behind, I texted the guy while he was on the PBD live stream during the election night, and I told him, I think it's over. I think Trump's got this. And he responds right away. And, I won't say the details of what we talked about, but he's a real one, man. And he's a true believer, and he's got incredible capacity to argue our points in a compelling fashion that can absolutely flatten our opposition, but also embrace people that are not us. And most libertarians can't do that. So all of the haters, all of the people in the Libertarian Party that are like, fuck Dave Smith, you're an idiot, okay?
Oh, you are an idiot.
Is awesome.
You will never have 1/millionth, even a millionth of Dave's influence. And as I say, it's happening to him because he put in the time, he put in the work. I mean, he's told me when I've interviewed him about his early days that he went like 2 years on Part of the Problem with basically no traction at all. Mm-hmm. None. And he just kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. So, it's an overnight success that took years, which is true of most overnight successes, by the way.
That's right. Yep. He's been doing it for 15 years, and people will say, where'd this guy come from? It's like, well, he put in the time. And he's
Clint,
got
by
the
way,
skills.
now I get to brag to people because Dave was a groomsman at my wedding.
Oh, nice.
So when I was with Candace Owens, I told her that as a way of kind of explaining, look, I'm a good guy. Here's how I can prove it. But then I tell them that Michael Malice was my best man, and they just stop like with a cold white expression, like a ghost, like, oh my gosh, what kind of a best man speech did that guy give? And all I can say is, you wish you could have been there.
Oh, I bet it's legendary, no doubt. Anyways, the great Tom Woods. Tell people where they can follow you, Tom.
TomWoods.com, and at the very top of TomWoods.com, you can even do what every instinct in your body is telling you not to do, which is sign up for my email list. You think, I don't want to get any emails. I know you don't, but you do want to get mine unless you have brain damage. So TomWoods.com.
Right. TomWoods.com. Listen to the Tom Woods Show. He's great. You'll learn a lot if you haven't already been deep down this rabbit hole, and even if you have, he'll teach you more. As I brought him on today to steel man and devour any arguments in favor of tariffs. So I appreciate your time, Tom, and thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hit the like button, subscribe, share it around, and leave a comment down below if I got anything wrong, which I'm sure I did. Appreciate you guys. See you soon. Peace.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go?